Okay, Madam Chair, I think we are ready. We'll do elections after the presentation, but we have the our zoning code rewrite team here to give an update to you on that, on how that's going.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order with that. I will turn it over to the team.
Perfect. Is it shared? Sorry. Okay. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Lindsay Mosier. I'm the communications manager for planning and development services. And we have our zoning code rewrite here tonight to talk about module 3 and where we're at. So we just finished up, well, I'll backtrack a little bit. We started this process back in fall of 2020. It's been broken up into 3 different modules, and we've had pretty extensive community outreach within each of those modules. Once we were done with module 2, we decided we weren't quite there yet. We made some pretty substantial edits, went back out in front of the community in summer of 2022 to make sure we were headed on the right track, received really positive feedback. And now we're in fall talking about module 3. We just finished outreach about a week and a half ago. We'll have an outreach summary report here in the coming weeks and months, but that went pretty well as well. And I recognize some of your faces I've seen at some of those events. And the next steps will be the public hearing process in the winter and into the summer as well. So just to recap, this is kind of the framework that we worked through for our module 3 and some of the feedback that we've heard. We know that we have a variety of great neighborhoods. We want to direct development where there's planned public investment. We need to have a strategy to produce affordable and sustainable housing, and we need to manage growth along the edges of the city. So now we'll go through module 3, and the team will go through what those different application types look like. And with that, I'll kick it over to Andrea.
Good evening, commissioners. For the record, Andrea Tuning. To get us started off, it's really important to understand where we had been through the community engagement process, because we had gathered quite a bit of feedback, and really that feedback requested that the city create consistent and predictable decisions, really making sure that we had conversations with all of our providers, whether those were internal to the city of Boise or our external agency partners as well, and then defining clear roles for our stakeholders. And based on that information, we ultimately came up with what we were hoping our process would do in module 3. And so as a part of that, we ultimately determined that it was critical for our process to reinforce our goals and our strategic priorities as a city, ensuring that we involved all of the important and critical partners. So whether that was our internal partners or our external partners, so that we could achieve those goals that we were seeking to do. And then, of course, obtaining those excellent projects, which we were striving for. So when we looked at module 3, we ultimately made some major modifications, and the modifications that we've identified as key changes, including creating those application types, and we'll kind of walk through what that means, creating a new application type as well, knowing that an allowed use is the first step, but the allowed form is also almost as important, because our land is so valuable that we want to make sure that we're getting the ideal scenario in those key locations throughout the city of Boise. We also proposed to create an interdepartmental review committee that focuses on the communication across cities' departments, as well as those external agencies such as HCHD, ITD, our irrigation companies, and those partners. We also propose to reintroduce the hearings examiner, which our code currently allows us to do. We originally had a hearings examiner for several years. Over time, we decided that we probably didn't need that role at the city of Boise, but we think that that position can fulfill very specific goals that we have as a city. We also would like to reclassify our design review committee into a full commission. And then, of course, updating our development findings to be more modern and to really focus on what we are looking for as a city to achieve our goals and strategic priorities. So when we talk about application types, we've ultimately identified 4 specific types of applications. So we've got the very simple review. So I think of that as maybe an over-the-counter review or something that takes just a couple of days. An administrative review, which does have use-specific standards, which might take a little bit longer and may take some research and some time to evaluate the proposal. Type 3, which is the appointed body review. The Historic Preservation Commission would fall under that. So would the Design Review Committee and the Hearings Examiner and the Planning and Zoning Commission as well. And then the final one is the City Council review. And when we look at the differences between these applications, we can see that they become more complex, or if we start from type 4, we can say that those are identified in the Local Land Use Planning Act. And so our state doctrine ultimately requires that the City Council reviews and approves those items. When we look at the type 3, when we look at the red items, those are items that are not considered to be required by the state law, but those are items that we've identified that there's probably an important component that our community needs to be involved in. And so we've kind of identified those into the 4 bodies that we've talked about. So the hearings examiner would be reviewing variance applications. Planning and zoning would focus on land use, such as expansions of non-conforming uses. They would focus on the allowed use or alternative form. So in that case where they wouldn't be meeting that urban form that we would be looking for, but they are the allowed use. Conditional use permits, and then some of our complex hillside as well as river system permits. So really focusing on that land use piece. Design Review Commission would be focusing on architectural design through the major small lots and our major design review applications. And then of course, you as the Historic Preservation Commission would be reviewing those certificate of appropriateness. And not a whole lot changes in regard to what your purview would be. The important part with 3 and 4 is that they require that we have an interdepartmental review committee review that. And so we would all get around a round table. Anybody that would have a stake in that development would have an opportunity to talk about that. So whether that is solid waste location, whether that is irrigation districts, whether it's architectural design, land use, we would all have the opportunity to coordinate our efforts together so that, number one, everybody knows what everyone else is looking for as an end result, and that we can coordinate our efforts and understand how one person's requirement or their suggestion might impact another, and so that we can really coordinate those efforts to achieve those great projects. Type 2 is a little bit different. So those are really those administrative review applications that will have use-specific standards. There is a caveat. So there are some that have the asterisk behind it, and that identifies projects that we may identify and say they might need a little bit more coordination. And so we will require that they have that interdepartmental review as they go, but they would still be reviewed at the administrative process. The important component here also identifies what that appeal structure looks like. So when we have those very simple applications that don't require much, there is no appeal. Type 2 or staff level applications, those would appeal to our hearings examiner. Any type 3 application that is reviewed and approved or denied would appeal to the city council, and then city council decisions, if they were chosen to appeal, would go before our judicial review process. And so what we do is when we categorize all of these different review bodies, we identify that they really have an expertise or an area of interest, which they are the experts in. So whether those are use-specific standards, whether it is a subject matter, an objective or a consistent review, which the hearings examiner can provide us, historic design, architectural design, land use, and then really focusing on policy-related decisions going to our city council. So the highlighted items that you see in bold are really new components of what we're proposing as part of Module 3. So that interdepartmental agency review, the hearings examiner, and the transition from the design review committee to a full commission. When we talk about that interdepartmental review, it really does just allow us to coordinate all of our efforts to make sure that we're all aligning our goals to create those excellent projects that the city is currently seeking. And so it will be anything from an internal department to our external agencies. Those are noted specifically here being like Capital City Development Corporation, school districts, irrigation districts, as well as all of our citywide departments. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Deanna, and she's going to walk you through some of those allowed use and allowed form versus the alternative form.
Thank you, Andrea. Good evening, commissioners. As Andrea said, I'm going to walk us through a couple of different changes we've made to the zoning code to really help us reinforce our city's vision and goals through our process. One specific one is the creation of a new application type that we're calling allowed use, and it would be either an allowed use, allowed form, or an application for allowed use alternative form. So within our zoning code, we typically center applications based off of if it's an allowed use or not, and if it's a conditional use or a rezone, et cetera. So what we also care though about is making sure that the allowed use is meeting our city's goals. And a lot of that has to do with how that building is built. So what we've done is decided to focus on our mixed use areas where we heard from our community that they wanted us to direct our most intense development within those mixed use areas. And they're shown here on the screen. We have our MX1, which is neighborhood, which is some of that small scale neighborhood serving commercial. MX3, which is the mixed use active. That's typically found on State Street, Fairview, Vista, and a variety of different activity centers. We have our MX4, which is found only on State Street, which is mixed use transit oriented development. The city's been planning for decades to have high capacity transit along State Street. And there's 4 identified nodes that would eventually become transit stations. And we want to support our most intense development and also development that supports transit at those locations. And then of course we have our MX5, which is mixed use downtown. We have plenty of investment there and we want to continue to see growth within those areas. So where those are shown on the map, this is where we have specific rules about how those buildings should be built. And if they're built a certain way, they get to be reviewed in an administrative process. And if they don't meet those form standards, that urban form we're seeking to achieve within these select locations, they become, so if they don't meet that, they become a type 3 application requiring planning and zoning review because we feel that should be a public decision about how we're using our land within our city. So the best way to do this is through example. That's kind of a lot of words to just show 2 different pictures, which hopefully helps get the picture, the message across. So we're imagining we're in an MX3 location. So think State Street, Vista, Fairview. And we know multifamily is allowed in these areas. However, there's 2 different types of multifamily that support different goals within our city. As you can see, the one on my left, which is would be considered a type 2 application. So that's a staff level review. We have very specific use-specific standards, and we would require interdepartmental review. However, we've already established that this form helps support the city's goals, and we want to review and approve that if it meets those use-specific standards administratively. So that type of form, which is 4 or more stories and it does not exceed our parking minimums, would be approved administratively. If a developer comes in and they go, we don't want to provide that product, we want a lower intensity development here and we want it to have excess amounts of parking, it would then become a type 3 because that's not going to help support our city's goals for urban development within these select corridors. So again, we believe that it should be a public decision with review to make sure we're taking advantage of our development potential within our cities. And then our other way we've kind of reviewed our code is really to get what we want from our development findings. And we have done this to many of the application types, not all. So I'm not sure if we changed much with the certificate of occupancy or certificate of appropriateness, but we all have legal findings that we review each project against. And does this help meet those findings? So this is a good example of from our design review findings. Our previous findings say the traffic impact is minimized. First, it's only speaking really to traffic and minimizing impact. And what we did was really subtle, but we specifically said what we want, which is a site that provides a safe, convenient, and efficient network, transportation network. So again, flipping it, but using our new findings to actually get what we want so that we can review the project based off of that. And then Lena has a great job of walking through how this translates to process and when it gets to go to commission.
Thanks, Deanna. Good evening, Commissioners. Lena Walker for the record. So looking at how all of this actually translates into our process framework and how that process compares to what we currently have now, I'm going to show you that in just the next couple of slides and try to keep it high level. So this is an example here of the change in process for an administratively reviewed project. So for example, a duplex. As you can see from those flowcharts, there's not a whole lot of difference here. The key difference here that you can really notice is that under our current process, when we get applications received for, say, a pre-application meeting, there's a high level of variability in how complete that concept might be. It could be anything from back of a napkin sketch to something fairly fully fleshed out. So what we would like to see is having that early concept review meeting where we can work with an applicant at the beginning of their process to make sure that they're looking the right places in the code, make sure that they are aware of kind of what our priorities and concerns would be for that project so that when it is submitted, it is at that 100% level so staff can write that report and get that decision turned around in a timely manner. And that appeal would then go to the hearing examiner. Underneath, you can see that there are some administratively approved processes that could require interdepartmental review. So as an example, if you're looking at one of those allowed use, allowed form applications, although we are comfortable with the use specific standards and our design guidelines, making sure that we're getting that excellent project that we need at an administratively reviewed level, we do recognize that there may be the need for multiple departments or even external agency partners such as ACHD to come together and make sure that we're getting all of that feedback at the same time. Again, to ensure that when that application is submitted, it's at that full 100% so that we're not having applications submitted and then kind of trying to leave it up to staff to try to chase down all these different departments or agency partners and incorporating that feedback, which at times can be even conflicting with one another. So really trying to get everyone in the room in a timely manner for the projects that really need it. Going on to the hearing level. So this is perhaps a little more relevant to Historic Preservation Commission or our different hearing level bodies. Again, you can kind of see the changes there in the existing process and the proposed process. When we have applicants coming in for that pre-app meeting, concept could be anywhere from 0 to 100%. What we would like to see is having an early concept review meeting. An applicant could then go out and speak with the neighborhood and get their feedback as well on that initial concept that they've built out. They would return to actually have a mid-process review check-in with staff so that we could touch base on what was discussed at that neighborhood meeting. How have they incorporated or not the feedback that we gave them in that initial meeting, and then send it on for that interdepartmental review. Then the staff would write report and it would go to the commission with the appeal going to the appropriate body. So in the case of the Historic Preservation Commission, that's where you all would come in, and then, if there were appeals, we would take it from there. And again, city council level, these type 4 applications, really the only difference here between type 4 and type 3 is that we do have that formal recommendation coming from the Planning and Zoning Commission before it goes on to city council to make that final decision. Finally, we've also been working in our department to try to come up with different ways that we can really address the community feedback we've heard of wanting to involve the community and partners early in the process. So we've talked a lot about that interdepartmental review and how we kind of get different agencies and departments all on the same page with each other. But, we also want to make sure that our community is getting involved as early as possible and that we're communicating effectively with them. So our GIS staff is currently in the process of working on this community development tracker. We do have a live version of this now that you could take a look at if you wanted to give feedback. We would love to hear your thoughts. And what this is a GIS-based tool that presents all of the information that is currently already publicly available through an Acela portal. But this would allow people to actually look at the map and see all of the applications that are coming through in their neighborhood, see where they are in the process, and then also give them an easy way to give feedback to planning and zoning staff if they would like to comment on that application. So if you were to live in an historic district and you wanted to see where all the live applications for a certificate of appropriateness were, you would be able to look at this map and quickly see all of those rather than needing to know the application number for every single individual application.
Can I
And
ask
that's-
a question quick?
Yeah, sure.
So then when they're giving the feedback for like a historic property, would that be coming to, how does that get to us? Or does
So-
it need to?
Sure, that's a great question. It would come to you in the same way that public feedback comes now. So there would be a link to fill out a mail form, like an automatic form that would populate. And that information would go to the Planning and Development Services main email and would then be forwarded on to the staff that is working on that application. So you would still see all of that correspondence in your
Okay.
packet, just like you do now.
Awesome,
And
thank you.
I have a
Mhm.
follow-up question to that.
Sure.
For applications that are like the certificate of appropriateness minor that are going to be approved at staff level, how does that feedback impact the application? If there's opposition to a project, would it immediately come to a hearing level, or is it just taken kind of to work and mediate between staff and the applicant?
Sure, Commissioner Montoto, and I may tap Andrea a little bit for this as well for process, but in general, no. So it would be the same as now as when applications are administratively approved. For example, I'll use ADU as an example just because it's one that I know off the top of my head. If we currently require noticing of immediate neighbors for an ADU application, that is administratively approved. However, neighbors can submit comment if they have concerns or if they're supportive of that project. That is included in the staff report and in the staff review. If they were to appeal an administrative decision, that appeal of a staff level historic application would then appeal to the Historic Preservation Commission. Is that correct? Yes.
Thank you.
So just to close out, we'd be happy to stand for any other questions as well, but there's links here for that community development tracker and for the email that goes directly to this whole team here for any comments that you might have on the zoning code. We also have the website up where you can read the full draft if you would like and look at the conversion map. So we are looking to have that comments deadline of December 15th. So we'd love to, any thoughts that you would like to share, we'd love to get them. And if we could have them by that December 15th deadline, that'll give staff enough time to incorporate that feedback into our final review before we move into the formal application process.
I have a question. This goes back to like earlier in the presentation, you have type 2 hearing examiner approves variance. And is that done now or will be done before it gets to the Historic Preservation Commission? Will a variance be granted before the HPC?
Same process as currently.
And I had another question, the interdepartmental review, would that include the Historic Preservation Planner?
Yes.
Okay.
So the interdepartmental review would be a regularly occurring meeting, and the staff that is working on that application would be present for that, as well as a representative from ACHD or the Boise School District, whoever might need to be in the room for that application review.
So I just asked that because the Historic Preservation Commission itself, I mean, its guiding principle is to encourage historic preservation throughout the city. And that's not just restricted to the historic districts designated at a local level. So Richard might see a property and say, that's a great example of mid-century architecture and that should be preserved and rehabilitated. So it'd be nice if that was included in that process, is that he's included in these projects that are not only within the local historic district, but potentially outside those district boundaries.
Commissioner Millay, that's great feedback. Thank you. And we do have internal staff processes as well when we're reviewing projects on a monthly basis, where we really try to get, all eyes on each project so that we are getting that feedback from everyone's particular expertise. So thank you for that. Appreciated.
I have a question as well. So I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that really the purpose of this entire rewrite is to, going back to I think the 3 goals, one of the main ones, increasing density and affordability in terms of housing. And our historic districts are really existing to protect these areas to adverse negative developmental impact. And so what are the changes that we're going to be seeing within the historic districts based off of the new ordinances, R1, R1C, R2, and how are those going to impact the applications that come before us? So if we have, for example, an empty lot in a historic district, what are the potentials that can go on that lot with the new guidelines, if you will, that would be allowed on that lot? Does that make sense?
Yes, Commissioner Montoto, that's a good question. I guess I would lead by saying that, for one, the historic overlay is essentially remaining unchanged. So, and that historic overlay does take, sort of the primary seat when we're looking at historic properties. So any of the requirements that are currently in that historic overlay would continue to be in place regardless of changes to the base zoning requirements. There have been changes to the dimensional standards for the R1C zone specifically. Did you mention another one? Sorry.
R2.
And R2 as well.
Yeah. So when you say dimensional changes, meaning height, massing, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so that would include setbacks. So yard setbacks, that could include building height, minimum lot size, and street frontage requirements.
And are we generally seeing an allowed increase in height, decrease in setbacks? Is that kind of generally what?
Commissioner Montoto, yes, I would say in general, some of the high level changes to the dimensional standards for residential zones is there has been some increase in the allowance of height. I think that the setbacks are really going to vary by zone. So you might want to kind of take a look at those and see, especially for the R1C and R2. And then there's also some specific standards, like use specific standards for residential uses in those zones that may also have an impact on the built form that you're looking at.
And is this something that Josh and Richard have been involved in at all, offering feedback as to how these increases or decreases in dimension could potentially create adverse impacts on the historic districts when we're looking at new development?
Commissioner Montoto, yes, we are currently in the process of a sort of reiterative all staff review of these drafts of the new zoning code. And so we are soliciting feedback from design review folks, historic preservation, current planners, and long-range planners to ensure that the changes that we're making are, we're thinking about all those different pieces of the code.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question. How much additional time per application do you think the interdepartment review is going to add?
Commissioner Otter, that's also a great question. I think ideally our hope is that it would cause less time to be taken up than we currently have now. So because it would be a regularly occurring meeting, we are working with our agency partners to see what kind of time frame would work best for them. How frequently can they meet, for how many hours? How would they have a representative coming to that on a regular basis? But I believe the goal here is really to make more efficient use of everyone's time, as opposed to under our current system, if we're kind of sending out transmittals to our agency partners, it's sort of incumbent on the planner who's writing that staff report, if they don't hear back within a certain amount of time, to need to try to follow up with them. And some of that feedback might be coming in very late in the process, and it could have a significant impact on the site design or building design, which would then cause further delays, because in order to incorporate that feedback, especially if it has to do with traffic impacts or solid waste or something like that, that could be really influential, that could add a lot of time to that application timeline. So the idea is, by having those people speaking to each other rather than sort of through a conduit of a single planner, some of those issues can be resolved actually within the time frame of that meeting rather than through writing.
Any other questions?
I have one more. So this is sort of about the zoning code rewrite, but general like historic preservation and zoning codes in other cities. So city of Portland went through something similar. They went through a zoning code rewrite, and the reaction to that zoning code rewrite to add density was to designate more historic districts. A lot of mid-century neighborhoods were being designated throughout Portland. So if that is the case, will the city be able to handle the push or the staffing if more historic districts are wanted by the city and its residents as a reaction to the zoning code rewrite?
Commissioner Moy, that's a great question. And if anyone else would like to jump in on this one specifically, I would say feel free. Josh, looking at you. Two things I will say is, one, through this process, we have started to already flag additional changes that may need to be made that are related to the zoning code, but are not really appropriate within the context of this specific rewrite. So for example, we're not currently doing a survey of historic neighborhoods or properties in the city, but that is something that may need to occur after the zoning code has been adopted. So that's kind of looking forward to next steps. And also a major part of that is as we're working through this rewrite, we are, working with some of our new staff who have been brought on to do sort of development services managing kind of how we structure ourselves as a department. So we are aware of the potential for staffing need changes and trying to get out in front of that and kind of look to the future of what we might need to do in terms of our internal work. Do you want to add anything to that, Josh?
Thank you, Lena. I think that was really well said about the way that we are rearranging our work with our development services group, and the way that we approach applications and kind of front loading the process is going to create efficiencies. There are staffing changes we know we will need. We don't know what those are yet. The topic of new districts is certainly a tricky one, because we do have a growing desire in the city to create new districts. I think you're well aware the West Downtown or the West End folks are very interested in creating a new district. There have been other districts proposed recently as well. Some mid-century districts, I think, are on the radar. The challenge with that is new districts means more staff, and that means real money. And that is a conversation we have to have with leadership, come up with a strategic plan about our staffing needs and how we're going to move forward with those. Frankly, we're kind of maxed out right now. So new districts probably does mean more staff. And that's, that's a process to go through, and quite a conversation to go through to get those additional staff members, but we know it would be needed.
And I just wanted to add one quick thing. I heard a couple things saying one of the goals is to increase density. I think that if we could reflect back to our revised 1 and 2 draft, we actually were really deliberate in saying that we're having a variety of neighborhoods, and that we're directing development where we have that investment, which is typically in our mixed use zones. So I would encourage you to take a look at how we've tried to take a very modest approach to changes in that dimensional standard, creating incentives around reusing existing buildings, adaptive reuse. I think there's a lot more layers here of how we're trying to support the variety of neighborhoods we have. And it's not just a blanket increased density everywhere.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Okay. Thank you so much. Josh, do we need to do the agenda review, or do you want to do elections first?
Let's go ahead and do elections. So
Okay.
with Danielle Weaver's departure, we will need a new chairperson. So I would look for any volunteers or any nominations.
I have been chair for way too long. I would love to see someone else have a turn.
I've been here for a long time. I can volunteer.
That would be great. I will nominate Commissioner Maroney as, do we need to vote on it, Josh, or can we just do a volunteer?
We do need to vote.
Okay, then I will nominate Commissioner Maroney as chair.
I'll second that.
Christina, would you please call the roll? Pape?
Aye. Koski,
Aye.
Maroney,
Aye.
Montoto,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Kintai,
Aye.
Otter,
Aye.
all in favor. Motion carries.
Wonderful. Do you want me to finish up? Yeah. Okay. Josh, can we have the agenda review, please?
Yeah, Madam Chair. So tonight, there is a slight change to the script that was distributed. We would recommend to hear item number 1. There's some new information that we would certainly like to discuss on that. We will hear item number 2. And we would propose item number 3 for consent.
Any opposition to putting item number 3 on the consent agenda?
I actually wanted to hear number 3.
Okay, and we will hear. all
We will do
3.
that.
Yep, great. Okay, anything else?
That is it.
Wonderful. Let's go ahead and call it. And I think there's food in the other room.
Yep.
So-
We'll see you back here in a few.
Awesome, thanks. Good evening and welcome to the City of Boise's Historic Preservation Commission public hearing. A few things to start out with for tonight's proceedings. Everyone from the public entering the hearing virtually has been automatically muted and cannot speak. As the item you're interested in comes up for discussion, you will be called upon and unmuted. There's a chat function in Zoom. This is not part of the record and should be only used if technical difficulties arise. Our procedures for public hearings begin with a presentation from the planning team, then we'll go to the applicant and then the representative of the Registered Neighborhood Association, followed by questions from the commission. After that, we proceed to public testimony, starting with those who are in person, then who have signed up on the sign-up sheet in advance, and then anyone else in public who raises their hand virtually. If you are attending through your telephone, you can type in *9 to raise your hand. Each member of the public is allowed up to 3 minutes for testimony. We are strict with that time as it is limited in code. Finally, the applicant is allowed 5 minutes for rebuttal, after which the hearing will be closed and the commission will deliberate and render a decision. I just realized that my script says that I now have the floor. I don't think I was supposed to read that, but
No, it's perfect. You're good.
myself, I have
Yep.
the floor. I am Chairperson Montoto and I will continue reading my script. I apologize. We are citizen volunteers appointed by the mayor and approved by the city council. We make final decisions on conditional use permits. This I don't think is right for us. We utilize a consent agenda. This means that if the applicant agrees with the staff report, there is no public opposition, the item will be placed on the consent agenda. All items that are placed on the consent agenda are approved with one motion without further public comment. For items not on the consent agenda, we will hold a full public hearing in the order just detailed a few minutes ago with staff, the applicant, the neighborhood association, and then public testimony. Thank you all for attending tonight. Christina, will you please call the roll?
Pape,
Here.
Koski,
Here.
Maroney,
Here.
Montoto,
Here.
Malloy.
Here.
Kintai,
Here.
Otter,
Here.
all present.
Thank you. We do not have any items on the consent agenda this evening, and we do not have any deferrals. So first, we will hear item number 1, and that is, oh, I'm sorry, I should have done the minutes. Sorry, my script is not right. I apologize. We need to approve the minutes from the October 24th, 2022 hearing. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
I'll second.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Otter. Second from Commissioner Maroney. Christina, can you please call the roll?
Aye.
Koski,
Abstain.
Maroney,
Aye.
Montoto,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Kintai,
Aye.
Otter,
Aye.
6 in favor, 1 abstain. Motion carries.
Thank you. Now we will move on to our first item on the agenda this evening, and that is DRH 22-00380, James Ritter at 1706 North 10th Street. Staff, may we please have the report?
Yes. Oh yeah, the button. Yeah. I'm on green. Okay, good. Okay. Yes, as you say, this is DRH 22-00380, 1706 North 10th. This is a requested approval to demolish an existing as originally thought, an existing non-contributing structure and construct a new single-family residence with a detached garage on the property. It's in the north end, and it's initially considered to be non-contributing. The site location is shown here. This is a photograph of the existing home. And there was an email that was received today that indicated that the State Historic Preservation Office's documentation for the inventory shows that this property is contributing, whereas our City of Boise inventory listing shows it as non-contributing. And just in case we get to it, here's the site plan for what they're proposing, where the garage would be in the rear and what the garage would look like by rid of the elevations. As I said, we received this email indicating that there's a discrepancy between the contributing and non-contributing status based on past situations where this happened. It usually led to the being delaying the process, where we would have to go through some research to determine what the facts and whether it is contributing or non-contributing. So we might want this to be deferred to the next meeting is my general recommendation.
Thank you, Richard. Does the commission have any questions? Commissioner
Chair?
Otter, please.
I have a question. So when this came up a couple months ago, we determined, or the attorney determined, so I guess I'm going to look at the attorney again, that the code required that the applicant only look at the City of Boise's records for conformity versus nonconformity when proceeding forward. So I wonder if that has changed at all from the attorney's perspective. And also it looked from your staff's perspective, the City of Boise's records are that it is non-conforming. Is that correct?
Yes, that is what ours showed. Yes. Non-contributing. Yeah.
Non-contributing, sorry.
Yeah, Madam Chair, that's my understanding. This is the City of Boise's would be the official records to look for. I don't think there would be a requirement that they go to another competing jurisdiction.
Any other questions? Okay.
Yeah, I have a question, Madam Chair.
Please, Commissioner Koski.
What process do we have to verify the records that we have? I mean, we have the State Historic Preservation Office having one document with one different check mark on it from the same period and the one that the city has. So do we have last time we deferred the item so we could look at it further at the city and come to a conclusion. Do we have a process like that again to use? Maybe that's for Josh.
I'll jump in, Madam Chair, Commissioner Koski. You're right. And Commissioner Otter, you're right. This did come up 6 months ago, maybe. The process that took place in 1993 and 94 when the survey was done and adopted, I think was not clear to anyone on city staff or I think, anyone on the commission now. It was long enough ago that there's quite a bit of uncertainty about how this inconsistency appeared within the surveys. On that last application, Richard's correct. We did defer it to do a little bit more research. That research really didn't result in us finding any sort of breadcrumbs or any indication of how this error happened. The commission ultimately decided, with some input from the city attorney, as mentioned, that the city is the record keeper on these, and we did not have an explanation for the discrepancy. If you did decide to defer it tonight, that would allow staff an opportunity to do with Richard's expertise in the valuation of the status, how we, which is possibly the correct status. I think that's still a little difficult to, there is an established process for resurveying a property. The staff doing some research over the next month would not be that. So it would not be any sort of official change of status. What it would do would give the commission better information to make a decision on. But if you're comfortable tonight that it's non-contributing, that is the record that the city has. That is the direction that we did go on that previous application. You could make that decision tonight, or you could ask us to do whatever investigation we can do to give you as much information as possible to make your decision.
Thank you, Josh. I have a question for legal. Can we proceed with the hearing and then make a decision on what to do? Is that where we're at this point?
Point of clarification, do you mean take the hearing, do the hearing, and then come back to another meeting?
If we decide to defer it, yes. Like, do we proceed with the hearing as if we are going to make a decision on the application versus just deferring it right now?
Yeah, if you wanted to defer it for additional information, it's probably better to conduct the hearing at a later date so that the applicant and yourselves can review any sort of new evidence that staff, applicant, or maybe a member of the public wanted to produce. It's a cleaner record to do it that way.
Okay, great. Thank you. Is there any discussion from the commission?
Hey, so that was my email that I looked at the SHPO record, and it said it was a contributing property versus non-contributing, which the staff or the city of Boise has on record. I can tell you from the SHPO perspective that the how those surveys worked was the city went out, hired somebody to do those surveys, collected that information. They then sent that information to SHPO, where SHPO would review it and either concur or not concur with the findings, the determinations of eligibility for all of the properties as either individually eligible, individually ineligible, contributing to a historic district, or non-contributing to a historic district. That information then should have gone back up to the city with the correct contributing or non-contributing. So if the SHPO disagreed with the consultant in this case, maybe it was sent to the SHPO with non-contributing, and then the SHPO said, no, actually it retains enough integrity to be contributing to the historic district, and then sent that information back to the city. The city should have the final documentation that's on record with the SHPO, and I would recommend the city requesting all of the records from SHPO. It's a free service as a certified local government.
I guess my problem with, Madam Chair, my problem with deferring is the applicant's responsibility was to look it up with the city. The applicant looked it up with the city. They bought the property based on the fact that it was non-contributing and are moving forward, or whenever they bought it. I have no idea when they bought it, but assuming that they bought it based on the knowledge that was provided by the city, and it wasn't their responsibility to call SHPO and ask SHPO what the records were. And I think that places an undue burden on the applicant to do a lot more extra homework than technically they're required to do, and that we can be asking them to do. And so I'm not sure it's fair to them to defer it when they have done everything right. And it is our mistake at the city for not having the correct records.
I agree with Commissioner Otter. I think that they shouldn't be penalized for a mistake in our filing. But I think that Commissioner Malloy is right. This is the second time this has happened within 6 months. We need to request the correct records and figure out where the discrepancies are so this doesn't keep happening. But I don't think that tonight is the night that we fix it.
Madam Chair, I think we need to, continue with this item in the hearing and go through the process. If it's approval or deferral, that comes at the end. So I think we need to continue going through hearing from the applicant, hearing from the neighborhood association, go through that process, ask our questions of the applicant if we have any, the neighborhood associations, listen through the whole process, and then have our our discussions and our motions, be it approval or deferral or whatever we choose.
Okay. I say let's proceed then. And with that, we will hear from the applicant. Is the applicant present?
I'm on Zoom. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 20 minutes.
Yeah, so my name is Michael Belt. I reside at 2901 West Neff Street in Boise, 83703. I am basically representing Jim Otter, or Jim Ritter, who is the owner of the property. So I guess this first off here, kind of being thrown with the curveball. I would say, knowing, our application was submitted thinking that it was a non-contributing. And I do agree that at least to go through the process here and at least determine if you approve the project as it's currently been submitted for would be best. If down the road you guys decide that it in fact does want to be a contributing structure, then we'll just end up reapplying for a different sort of proposal. But with that, I don't really have anything else to add. Richard can probably go through the items of basically what we are proposing.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. You'll have 5 minutes for rebuttal after we hear from the public. Is the Registered Neighborhood Association here to testify? Great. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 20 minutes.
Okay. Sandy Herman. Is it on? Yeah. 1404 North 7th Street.
Okay. Yeah, so they're moving forward as you.
I'm a member of the Historic NINA team. This is my first time up here debuting in the snowy weather. Please give me your grace. I've been working on the team for a little while now, behind the scenes, and you could just call me a long-time listener and first-time caller. We on the team respectfully disagree with staff's approval of this project. NINA is uncomfortable with this application in its current form for these reasons. The 47% lot coverage is unacceptable. Unfortunate approvals passed in the past should not be used to circumvent the historic district requirements. Other substandard lot projects in the North End Historic District have worked very successfully within the required parameters or requested only a few additional percentage of the lot coverage. The houses on both sides of this application are both under 35% lot coverage. 1710 North 10th is at 17% and 1701 North 10th is at 26%. This is according to the Ada County assessor. HPC does not take precedent into account. Each project is evaluated on its own merits and in its particular location and hardships. The floor ratio, the floor area ratio, or FAR, is in the substandard lot ordinance requires that the built livable square footage on the lot be no higher than 55% of the lot size. This application is requesting 65% FAR, 2,200 square feet, livable space on 3,364 square foot lot, way above the zoning code's allowable FAR. While half of this space is in the basement, which does not significantly increase the massing of the home, there is a large amount of space on the upper floor of the garage and in the attic of the home that does contribute to the massing of structure, and if calculated, would bump the FAR even higher above the 55% max. Our calculations say that this would bump it to about 90%. We acknowledge that it is not the intent of the current applicant to use the garage and attic space as livable space. But this is part of the permanent structure that could easily be altered with or without legal permit to become part of the livable square footage at some point in the future by a different homeowner. The proposed house is much taller than the houses on either side. To all appearances, it is a 2-story house. There's only one 2-story house on the whole block face. We know that storage is a problem in small houses, but this design has approximately 800 square feet on the attic floor, which with a 7-foot head height. Per building code definitions, this is habitable space and should be included in the FAR calculations, which is right now at 65%, but should be higher. The design of the stairway to the basement would easily accommodate a stacked stairway to the second floor with just the removal of the small closet on the side entry. The proposed garage will need 2 side setback variances. It is much too tall to qualify for a 3-foot setback. The front setback may also need setback variances. And we did contact the city to confirm these facts. We thank the applicant for considering permeable paving and including the down shielded exterior lighting fixtures. Overall, we are concerned with the massing and how projects like this affect our neighborhood. We worry about the loss of modest housing and affordable housing. Our housing crisis is not solved by building the largest house possible on tiny lots. The city is sorely lacking in modest homes. The North End is a place where these houses exist, most particularly on this block, which has some of the smallest houses in the neighborhood. This kind of modest housing is not being built in new neighborhoods. Reducing the appeal of the smaller homes on either side of this project puts them in jeopardy as well, particularly the house on the north side that sits way back from the street. And that's it.
Thank you so much. Are there any members of the public wishing to testify this evening? Okay, it doesn't look like it. We did have one, but it was Sandy. So the applicant has 5 minutes for rebuttal if they would like to use it.
Hi, Michael Belt here again. Yeah, I just want to clarify a couple quick things. The original percentage lot coverage calculation that was on the drawings is inaccurate. We are proposing now just 40%. So instead of what it was before, which was over that. So I would like to point that out. Regarding the topic of this attic space, I definitely can sympathize with what the last person said. I can tell you that the true purpose of that is only for storage, and it's at a 6'6" ceiling height up in there, which for it to be habitable space, you've got to be at 7 feet. And so although someone could, I suppose, go in and retrofit and create something up there, the intent of what we're doing is solely going to be used for storage. And the house, I don't think really does visually appear to be a 2-story. I would say it's more of a 1.5 story with a dormer that's got a window in it. And so that would be, I think, everything I'd have to say about it.
Thank you. Any final questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. With that, I will go ahead and close the public portion of the hearing and think we should have some discussion. I guess I'll go ahead and start with my thoughts. I think having such a significant project on a home where there is uncertain status to the historic district attached to the property, I don't feel comfortable personally making a decision at this time, especially after Commissioner Malloy detailed the process of what possibly happened. So at this point, I would be in favor of deferral of this application. But I'd love to hear what my fellow commissioners think.
Madam Chair, if I could speak up, and I don't know, Josh or Richard, if you could help us out with this, but the substandard, maybe remind us of the substandard lot requirements when it comes to setbacks and height and lot coverage, because there's a lot going on here. They're trying to jam a lot into a small lot, so that'd be helpful.
Yep, Madam Chair, Commissioner Koski. So yeah, the substandard lot ordinance, it applies to areas in and out of the historic district, and it is a fairly complicated ordinance. So I don't blame you there. Just a couple of clarifications. Number one, that is a single-story garage in our view, and regardless qualifies for the 3-foot reduced setbacks through the substandard law ordinance. That is not dependent on height, but this is a single story garage. The floor plan doesn't show a stairway to that second floor. It is a drop down attic access, certainly not habitable square footage by our interpretations. Another aspect of the substandard law ordinance is front setbacks. Those can be between 10 and 20 feet as long as they're within 5 feet of the average of the adjacent properties. And their proposal is so they can go down to that 11 feet because I think one is at 12 and one's at 11. So these are things that can be done within the substandard law ordinance without a quote unquote variance, the actual application. And the height. So the substandard law ordinance has some specific definitions of height. It is 18 feet to the midpoint of the roof. But the second story has to be contained within the roof volume. I would call this structure a partial 2-story because of that center portion that does extend up outside of what we would call the roof volume. To call this a true story and a half by the definition of the ordinance, those front and rear dormers would not be there, and that second story would be contained within the roof volume. So I think by the definition in the ordinance, this is a partial 2-story.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll continue with my comments if I can.
Please.
So I agree with a lot of what Nina's testimony was today, and thank you for coming forward and speaking. I know it's public speaking sometimes is a tough thing to do, so thank you for that. On a substandard lot, there's different criteria on purpose because it's hard to put something there. I'm okay with the setbacks, especially after Josh's clarification. Height-wise, I'm concerned, especially that is a 2-story or a partial 2-story, and we're going above the height. We're going above the percentage of livable space by quite a bit. And the substandard lot ordinance allows us to do some of that, but they're exceeding that. So I'm uncomfortable with both of those things, and I'm uncomfortable with the contributing status issue. I'd rather not delay an applicant going through the process. I'm a homeowner too, and if I was trying to build a home, I want to get it done as soon as possible. But those would be my biggest concerns, and I would lean towards a deferral. One, for us to clarify its contributing or non-contributing status, and two, hopefully to allow some time for the applicant to come back to our staff and make some design changes that would be more applicable to the application.
Thank you, Commissioner Koski. Any other discussion? Perhaps a motion.
Okay, Madam Chair, I guess I'll follow that. I'll move for DRH 22-00380. I'd move to defer with the note that the city work with SHPO to confirm the contributing or non-contributing status, and that the applicant work with staff to bring it more into compliance with the project on a substandard lot.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Pape. Christina, will you please call the roll?
Pape,
Aye.
Koski,
Aye.
Maroney,
Aye.
Montoto,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Hintai,
Aye.
Otter,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on tonight's agenda is DRH 22-00403, Nick Schuler at 2637 West Ellis Street. This is a certificate of appropriateness to modify a previous approval to construct a new front porch on a property in an R1CH zone. Richard, maybe please have the report.
Okay, as stated, this is to request approval of a modification to the character defining facade that is not in conformance with the previously approved application DRH 22-00036 as conditioned. The property is located in the North End Historic District, and the classification of this property is contributing. Here is the site location for the property. Here's a photograph of the front facade before any work was done. And the condition mentioned that awning should be kept or replaced in kind. It came to our attention that other work has been done to the property. And here's the existing awning as it was taken down to get a sense of what it looked like, better than that previous photo provided. And as I stated before, here's the condition that the cover shall be repaired or replaced as necessary with like materials and form. The photograph and information that we were provided via email showed us that this is what was in fact being built or had been built at this stage in the process. And the analysis is from our perspective, the staff perspective, is the porch is built as excessive in massing, and the steps and the edge of porch are close to, if not within, a 15-foot setback, front setback. The vertical wood paneling along the wall of the porch and surrounding the porch structure and steps is not congruous with the rest of the property or adjacent properties. And I have highlighted the design guidelines and how this porch creates a false sense of history and is incongruous in size, scale, and material to the district and the Secretary of the Interior standards, a standard that is very similar to that portion of the design guideline that shows that this porch does not meet that standard because it is it's incompatibility based on massing, size, scale, and architectural features. And that's my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Richard?
Madam Chair, I do. And Richard, I have a question. On the previous certificate of appropriateness for, I guess that'd be DRH 22-00036. Was it in the application that they were going to do other work?
Yes, that-
Siding, work on the garage?
Well, the one aspect of that original application was a proposal to replace that, which led to this condition, was a proposal to replace that awning with a very small version of what we see now. And that led to my assumption, not having been a fly on the wall, that led to the decision to condition it so as that only repair can be done to that. And that application did have other things that relate, modifications to the best of my memory, that related to the back portion of the property, but there was nothing. And I don't recall about when, I didn't dig deep into the original application as far as like window replacements and things like that. I don't have that information in.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, great. Is the applicant present?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 20 minutes.
My name is Nick Schuler. My address is 12088 West Highlander Road in Boise, 83709. I appreciate you guys taking the time tonight to hear this again. So just to clarify on the application with the city and with the historic district, there was approval for the porch, new windows. We kept the siding intact, which is actually considered a non-contributing siding, not allowed siding that by being aluminum. But that was there previous to us purchasing it. And then as well as an interior remodel to reconfigure rooms, and that's all stated in there and approved. As far as the historic district is, typically the jurisdiction is from the front view and visible from the streets. So the interior stuff wasn't really relevant to the historic district. So basically 2637 West Ellis has been a labor of love that we spent just under a year. And so far we're just over $300,000 in renovating the home. The last thing we want to do is jeopardize not only the money we've invested, but also the time that we poured into this project. We do own multiple contributing North End properties, rentals and or remodels. And so we do value and respect, the historic district and what they're trying to maintain. So a couple of things. As far as just showing that our respect and wanting to follow along with the guidelines, we installed $30,000 worth of windows instead of 10,000. Most all the neighboring and most all the houses down the streets are all vinyl windows. We went with a more expensive option that you guys approved, which is a fiberglass composite Pella window with the grids in it. And they were, far more expensive, but we wanted to be compliant. You can see those in the picture. We maintained the exterior window trim, so the sashes and the trim is all original to the home. And like I said, that siding is a metal siding that technically is not allowed, but is, and you can see the neighbor's house has the white vinyl windows. But we just tried to keep the integrity of that. And we have obviously come before the historic district in the past for approvals, and so we're not trying to just sneak under the radar. Our goals are always to our homes, whether we're doing new builds or remodels, is to have them fully permitted, be compliant with the city ordinances and building codes, be respectful of the neighborhood and considerate to neighbors, and to run a safe and clean job site. Part of the reason for this porch issue was it was physically sinking into the ground. It was, the railings were attached to the home and it was pulling the siding off the home. The house was, when we purchased it, was not had no maintenance done to it for a long time. The neighbors were kind of tired of looking at it. It was a rental and just wasn't maintained, a lot of deferred maintenance. And the railing, there's some pictures that I sent to where it's actually rusted and rotting where it's separated. So the railing that, or the structure that was attached to the home and supported by the rails were actually not connected because they were rusted through. keep scrolling. There should be some more. I don't know. There's some close-up pictures that I sent in with the rusting, but anyways, so we received approval to rebuild the porch with like materials. Like Richard said, I don't know if there was a clear, obviously there wasn't a clear understanding of exactly what it was to be, size and or whatnot. I will make a note, the porch doesn't come out off the home any further than the previous one did with the railing as far as from the door to the steps. The steps were off to the side previously, which was kind of odd because every home down there, the steps are all centered straight out to the street off the center of the porch. And so they were, yeah, like at most every home down there the steps come down just like that. And like I said, that porch cover doesn't come out any further to the road or the setback than the previous one did. So like I said, clearly there was a disconnect in what was to be built or not to be built. And like I said, we have always tried to be compliant. And so I take responsibility if it's not what, like I said, it was pretty vague as far as like the actual posting. Previous posting was so certificate of appropriateness to construct a new front porch and add a dormer to an existing single-family home on a property, yada yada. So that, I mean, just very vague. We intended to put a metal roof back on it, and then black metal railing that is up to code, the height, and handrails down each side so that it's safe. So we mentioned the aluminum siding in the home. The home is not original. It's had at least 3 additions and remodels done to it. And so it's definitely not an original home by any means. We've taken as much care as we can to try to keep it looking as original as possible. Like I said, with the windows, exact same size, we custom ordered them. So there was no modification to the sizes or anything to them, and then keeping the original trim and sashes and the depth that is required from the siding to the window. So these are family homes. Our goal is to always to make a home where a family can live safely and functionally and build memories. There's many schools, parks, and pools nearby. And so with that, so it is important to us I'll just kind of finish with this, important to us when working in neighborhoods through remodels or new builds, historic or not, to consider neighborhood input. We have had overwhelming support and compliments as well as thank yous from neighbors. And like I had mentioned, that the house was not in good shape. It was not maintained. I guess the sprinkler system hadn't been turned on in 12 years. It was just really rough. And so we've had just such good feedback from neighbors walking by and stopping. And so we actually have an email that we received from the neighbor. This is from Scott Carley at 2635 West Ellis Avenue. He said, "To whom may concern, I have been very pleased with the work that Nick Schuler with Capstone Idaho has done in renovating the home at 2637 West Ellis Avenue. I live just east of this house. It has been long overdue. The north end has been going through a transformation as homes are being purchased, leveled, and new homes are constructed that don't fit in. This is not the case with Nick's project at 2637 West Ellis. He's taken extensive effort to maintain the charm of the neighborhood, adding modern features inside and upgrading a roof and fence to the outside of this house. I hope the committee will approve the added feature to the front of the house. It makes all the difference." And once again, that was from Scott Carley at 2635 West Ellis to the east of this property. I'll end it with that and open for questions, I guess, or feedback.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Schuler?
Madam Chair, I do.
Please.
Mr. Schuler, this is Commissioner Koski. Did you, in your initial application, apply to do any work on the garage?
So I'm not sure. I'd have to look back and see. The garage, we did a new roof, obviously, because it was in poor condition, and siding. But I had to go back and look at the original. It wouldn't have been through the historic district. Like I said, my understanding from everything I've gone through is it's basically from the street view. And so we did add a dormer on the back of the house that was approved, but it's not from street view, but you guys did approve that. And so, yeah, I don't know. There's no modification of the garage structurally, just new siding and a new roof.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shule. I bring that up because any alterations in the historic district need a certificate of approval if it's on any part of the property, including the garage. And I know there's new siding and trim on there that you did.
Okay, and that wasn't made clear to me previously with, like I said, from my knowledge, it was from the street view. Hence the grids and the windows on the front and the sides, but not on the back. So.
Okay, and then I have another question on your application or your letter with your design letter of intent from January. You say that only the front large windows will have exterior grids to match existing. I'm looking at the front of the house, and that's not the case. You put in windows with grids in between the glass. Is that correct?
What do you mean?
The window grids that are in the windows.
Those, yeah, the windows, the new ones that came have grids in the glass, not on the outside. I ordered them on the outside. They were all custom ordered, but that clearly did not happen.
Okay, because I just want to point out that those also do not meet historic preservation guidelines or your conditions of approval, specifically 1.C, where window buttons are supposed to be on the exterior of the glass 1/2 of an inch, which is what your application and your letter of intent said you were going to do.
Yes, and that was
the next question I have is, and I'm wondering, Josh, if you could pull up or Richard, pull up the picture of the original porch. And then I want to compare it to that picture we just saw. Okay, so I'm looking at the roof structure there and the size and the steps going to the left. And then if we go to the next picture of the current state. Okay, Mr. Schuler, I bring this up because in your conditions of approval that were given to you, it specifically says the front porch cover shall be repaired or replaced as necessary with like materials and form. This does not look like materials or form at all. Would you agree?
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. And like I said, it wasn't a intentional misunderstanding. I mean, clearly there's a misunderstanding in what in those details. And so, like I said, with the metal railing and the metal roof and the size of it, you can see in that previous picture, doesn't exceed past the one, just like the other one ended. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Schuler. Thank you, Commissioner.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. Is anyone from the Registered Neighborhood Association here to testify? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 20 minutes.
Madam Chair, Sandy Herman, 1404 North 7th Street. The North End loves a good front porch, and we appreciate the work that is being put in to rehabilitate this home, which clearly needed attention. However, we have an obligation to protect the integrity of contributing historic housing, which is why we object to this application. A C of A was issued with explicit guidance and conditions, which the applicant agreed to, but then defied. We expect people doing business in the North End to abide by the conditions of approval, and we expect the city to enforce their own rules. This issue was first brought to our attention by a neighbor who shares our frustration that it took 2 weeks for a stop work order to be issued while the work progressed. As a committee, we immediately had concerns about damage to the roof line. We reached out to SHPO, as you can see in your packet, and we asked about whether this has affected the home's contributing status. They directed us to the city, but we remain unclear as to the implications, and implications are here, but we do hope that the city will take the steps necessary to right this wrong. Nina feels very strongly that the city should enforce the certificate of appropriateness, conditions of approval for this and all other projects. Each applicant agrees to all conditions before approval is granted. The conditions were clearly stated in this case, and several of them were clearly violated. We would like the illegal porch removed and the original stoop and stoop cover rebuilt. We acknowledge that some of the historic roof framing was removed to install the new porch roof gable and hope that rebuilding the roof will restore the house to contributing status. All of the contributing buildings are precious to the integrity of our historic districts. We can't afford to lose any more of them. Nina would hope that the city could levy significant fines in cases like this and require the situation be physically remedied.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public tonight wishing to testify? It does not appear so. If the applicant would like, you have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yeah, I understand Nina's opinion or input. I respect them, what they do. Obviously, I feel it's excessive to tear the entire thing apart. If there's something that we could do to make it better, I don't know. I mean, obviously, like I said, we're gonna have matching railings, metal roof, all of which are significantly more expensive than just using wood. And then just to defer to Ship, is it Shippo? I don't know what it's called. Their email, basically they reflect or sent it back to the city or to the board. They didn't want anything to do with it and felt that they didn't need to step in and be involved, just to clarify that. But I'm just looking for hopefully a resolution. Obviously, I mean, learned a lesson and understand. I need to be more clear and more understanding exactly what can be done and can't be done on those types of approvals. And just also there was some kind of fad that came through, I don't know, 60s or 70s, the aluminum craze, where they did aluminum siding, all these aluminum porch covers. And so if you're going for historic, that it's in itself wouldn't have been original to the home at all. It would have been done, 40 years or 50 years after the home was built. And so to restore something that I don't even know how you would duplicate that or where you would, I have no idea. Something back to what it was that wasn't actually original. It's kind of a hard situation to try to figure out, but I'm just looking for some kind of a resolution to work together to, not completely tear it to shreds and tear it all apart. And just looking for you guys to hopefully be the mediator and come to a resolution.
Thank you. With that, I will go ahead and close the public portion of the hearing and would like to entertain some discussion.
Madam Chair, I'll start off if it's okay, since I had a lot of questions to ask. This is exactly the kind of stuff we've been dealing with for a while. And not only, I have so many problems with it. Their application says one thing. Their original application even says in their letter of intent, it says they want to change the aluminum shed porch cover to a wood frame gable with shingle roof. We told them no. We put in the conditions of approval, no, you can only repair what you have as is or in like form. And then he went and did it anyways. Did the exact same thing we told them we can't do. And then also in the conditions of approval, it specifically states what type of windows you can use and if there's grids we can do. And in his application, they say they're going to have let's see, front large windows will have exterior grids to match existing. And they didn't do it. He put in something cheaper, something that wasn't approved. And then there's been work done on the garage. If we'd have to check to see if that was in part of the application process, but if it wasn't, then he did non-approved work without a permit on a garage. And then to add to it, the material he used for his siding and trim work is non-approved material, as in our certificate of appropriateness. It says it has to be wood or smooth cement board only. And he used fake grain, non-wood trim and siding on the garage. It specifically says siding has to be smooth cement board siding or real wood. I have so many problems with this, and I know this agenda item is only for the front porch, but I believe that the city should take their full use of code and whatever they need to do for penalties on this applicant. And that if they want to do other things like work on the garage, they got to go through the application process. And I think they should have to remove the windows. I think they should remove all the siding, all the trim, and the whole front porch. Put it back the way it was, the way we approved it and told them we could. This is infuriating.
Thank you, Commissioner Koski. I echo your concerns. The implications of all of this work to the status of this home is devastating. And I would love to see work retrofitted to more of the original front facade. I also think that it was mentioned, I believe, by Ms. Herman, that it took 2 weeks for a stop work order to be issued on this property while work progressed. That is unacceptable. So much of this could have been prevented had it just been done when code enforcement was notified. And this is a very scary precedent that I would really hate to see set. So I would love to hear my fellow commissioners' thoughts.
Madam Chair, I agree with everything that Commissioner Koski and you have said about this. I think it also sets a really bad precedent for everybody who goes through the process and follows it. And that's not fair to them to go through for the people who do it right, and to allow somebody who does it wrong to get away with it, which is, it's an overall bad precedent that we're setting.
Thank you, Commissioner Otter.
Madam
Commissioner
Chair.
Malloy.
Yeah, I agree with all my commissioners. And I think, the Idaho State Code allows for the city to fine the owner with a misdemeanor up to $300 a day, and each day that violation continues, exists, shall constitute a separate offense. And I think they should use that to the full extent. Every day this thing is in violation, charge them $300 until it is fixed and it is back to the original appearance. Because as it stands now, I think you've jeopardized the status of this house.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. I, as chair, cannot make a motion, but I would love for any motion to include that Idaho State Code. Are there any other thoughts?
Madam Chair, I
Commissioner Maroney?
agree with what the other commissioners have said. I do think that we need to limit our conversation to what is in front of us, which is the porch. And I don't think that we can get into the garage territory right now.
I concur. Any other comments before we entertain a motion?
Madam Chair and Commissioner Maloney, I guess maybe I'd like to ask either Josh or council if these other items that are part of, that was done outside of the application, original application, can be part of this motion, be it the discussions we had about work on other parts of the building, on the siding, on the garage, the windows being inappropriate, if those can be part of it, or that needs to be a separate item.
I wouldn't vote on it because I haven't seen the evidence or the presentation for it.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Koski, I'll just jump in real quick. So there could be a number of things that don't follow the approved plans. We would not know that until we did our final inspection. The code enforcement complaint was for the front porch, so that is what is before you tonight. If there are additional deficiencies, they will have to remedy those either through this process of a modification of the certificate of appropriateness, or fix them to the approvals that are in place. But again, without having done our final zoning inspection on the building permit, I have no idea what is there and what isn't there. And I agree with Commissioner Maroney, we don't have those facts in front of us tonight.
Thank you, Josh. Any other discussion or a motion?
I guess I'll make a motion. So I motion to deny DRH 22-0043 based on the staff's recommendations, and that the city impose fines as stated in the Idaho statutes.
Thank you. Commissioner Malloy, do I have a second?
I have a legal, can we do that?
No, that would be a jurisdiction of the Court of General Jurisdiction for Ada County. But I think the message was pretty loudly received that I imagine staff will be conferring with code enforcement to make sure it's being addressed.
Thank you.
Commissioner Malloy, would you like to modify your
I will
motion?
modify my motion. So I move to deny DRH 22-0043 403 based on the findings of staff.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Otter. Christina, please call the roll.
Pape,
Aye.
Koski,
Aye.
Maroney.
Aye.
Montoto,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Kintai,
Aye.
Otter,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to our final item this evening. That's item number 3, DRH 22-00405, Kenneth Reed at 1507 North 5th Street. This is for a certificate of appropriateness to construct a new detached garage with ADU above on property in an R1CH zone. Richard, can we please have the report?
Sure. Yes, as stated, this is for the construction of the garage. I will show you images of what it appears will look like eventually. Why is it lagging? The will of death. Non-responding. Of course. Anyway, it's in the packet, what it's going to look like. The height of the garage is acceptable. It is, I believe it's the same or lower than, I'm at a loss for words because I can't scroll to my information, but is it the same or lower than the peak of the roof? Once again, I apologize for the technical glitch, but yes, we do move for approval of this application. It seems to meet the standards of materials choices and other elements and the layout. It's very similar to many rear garage proposals that we've looked at in the past. So, yeah. So we move for approval.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
I had a question, Madam Chair. Richard, I couldn't tell from the drawings if the garage is higher than the house or not. That was my one question.
Right. Per the documentation given, it was at, or I think I'm going to attempt to open again. Yes, the existing residence is at 20 feet and the garage ADU is within a foot. It's 20 feet, 9 inch to peak. So it is barely taller.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Okay, is the applicant present? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 20 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Kenneth Reed. I'm an architect. I live at 2415 Compass Drive, Boise. So I got this commission because I did an ADU that's almost identical to it on 14th Street for a Boise fireman named Ben Gira. And a coworker of his, Kevin O'Donnell here, asked if he could have something similar in his backyard. And I looked at it and I saw that his house is pretty small. Well, that just came on. And it's not very tall. And although his lot is slightly larger, it was still going to be a challenge. So I did talk to Josh and Richard and said, I don't think I can actually make this shorter than the existing house because the house is actually just a nice little contributing cottage. And they said, well, show us what you can do. And so this is what you see. It is a little bit taller. I don't think I can make it shorter, even if I did the massing where it was just a box and you had an 8-foot ceiling for a garage and an 8-foot ceiling for the room above and a foot for structure and a 1.5 feet or so for insulation on a roof. I think you'd still be tapping really close to 20 feet. And I don't think the massing would be, similar to the house. So this architecture tries to be similar to the house. And like I said, it resembles something I did on 14th Street about 3 years ago. And we also, in anticipation of hopefully getting this approved, we walked around and got the neighbors. Kevin walked around and talked to all of his neighbors, and it was fortunate. We got the list of neighbors, and all the neighbors are actually present. All the homeowners are actually present except for one. And we did do a certified mailing to them. And I sent that information to Richard this week. I don't know if it made it into your packet, but I do have all the neighbors approving and not objecting to this design. Because as you know, our next step is to get an ADU approval from planning and zoning if we're so fortunate to get your approval here tonight. I think that's it. I'll stand for any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Reed? Okay, thank you so much. It is Nina time. Please state your name and address for the record. You'll have 20 minutes.
Madam Chair, Sandy Herman, 1404 North 7th Street. We agree with staff on approval of this project. We think the 9 inches is pretty insignificant. And we only add that we hope the applicant considers permeable paving and shielded exterior lighting.
Thank you so much. Is there any member of the public wishing to testify? It does not appear so. If the applicant would like, you have 5 minutes for rebuttal. Okay, they're yielding their time. And with that, I will go ahead and close the public portion of the hearing, and we'll start, I guess, with my thoughts. This is a very cute house. And I personally don't have any issues with 9 inches. I don't think it's going to be that noticeable. I would hope that it does not exceed that, and that you would do your best to stay very vigilant in your building and execution of this. And with that, I would be voting in support of this application, but I would love to hear my fellow commissioners' thoughts.
I'll chime in, Madam Commissioner.
Please, Commissioner Koski.
Mr. Reed, good to see you again. I thought you were done with this game. You're back in. So if you consider the surrounding property, I mean, it's a 2-story house right directly behind them. They could put in a garage, it's a 2-story garage right directly across from it. Next to that is another 2-story. I'm not worried about the height in this case, especially considering what's going on in that alley. So I would be up for approval as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Koski. Any other commissioners want to weigh in? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Please, Commissioner Malloy.
Yeah. I move to approve DRH 22-00405 based on the staff recommendation and conditions of approval.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I can second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Otter. Christina, will you please call the roll?
Pape,
Aye.
Oski,
Aye.
Maroney.
Aye.
Montoto,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Kintai,
Aye.
Otter,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. That concludes our hearing for this evening. Thank you very much.